Now, here tonight, I'd like us to move to another issue that has been causing quite some conversation here in the country, and that is the Huduma number. And tonight, as we had promised you, we have the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Interior, Karanja Kibicho. Thank you very much for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you, Yvonne.
So, the first question, what's the difference between a Huduma number and the ID number that Kenyans currently have?
A big difference. I think we've been trying to explain the concept. The action of registering Kenyans is not a new action. If you remember, since independence, we've been carrying out registration through various laws, and depending on what the use is, we have been doing that. The law that you are talking about is the Registration of Persons Act that requires a person of age 18 to present themselves before a registration officer and get their data. Quite a number of personal data taken, and then they're issued with an ID. The ID then allows them to do quite a number of transactions, and we all know what an ID does in this country. And what we are trying to do, because over time we have seen that Kenyans have very many databases that concern their personal data, and therefore decided as government that we want to consolidate this data into one number. But the most critical process that we are taking on, since independence, this country has never had a digital register of its citizens. And what we are trying to do is to create that digital register. The simpler method that I've also been seeing what you're saying would have been to sit in a room, call,
and collate all the data.
But we are missing the point. What we are trying to do is to create a digital data where we get a live person, and those who have participated in our pilot program will tell you that if it's not a live person, this process does not proceed. So we'll need to get a live person who has eyes, has ears, has a nose, and we take digital fingerprints. And all we are doing is taking that, take the information about your ID without going into what did you provide when you're picking the ID. Take the information about your NSSF without going into the information you provided. We just need the number. Then in the back room, we will collate all this data into one database. And Kenyans, in the fullness of time, will decide whether we need all these other documents and replace them with one card.
So what? And then they get a card?
What we're doing now, and I think the anxiety that has been created is because Kenyans moved before time. We are not this week registering people. What we are doing is piloting, because we have been developing systems and we want to check whether they can work. And therefore we picked 40 sublocations in the country where we sent the equipment, we sent our people to just see whether the system can work. After that, we will come and do adjustment, and the feedback that we'll have received from Kenyans, give ourselves about 4 weeks. Then on 15th of March, if the systems will be fine-tuned, start the actual mass registration.
I mean, I think perhaps the discomfort that Kenyans have with this. The president announced this in January in Mombasa, we recall. In February, you're doing a pilot phase. In March, you hope to roll out the process. Just a matter of civic education and helping Kenyans understand this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. And some also raising the issue of public participation. Some Kenyans say, no one ever asked me whether I want a Huduma number. This is not something that I feel is necessary and important at this point in time.
I think we are oversimplifying this. This process started in 2016. You remember in 2018, around January, the president, through an executive order, gazetted a committee that was mandated to deal with registration of Kenyans in a digital format. 2018 is when January 2018. Before then, there was a lot of planning, and I can tell you, for the last 1 year plus, we, as the technical committee, and I chair the technical committee, have been meeting without fail once every week, planning this, because it's a massive exercise. If we are going to collect digital data of Kenyans, who we approximate to be between 45 and 50 million, it's certainly not a process that you can plan in 1 month. There's a process we have been at since 2017.
All right, but my question is, you've been doing that since 2017. You've been meeting every week, as you say, but that's what's happening on the back end. To what extent have you had civic education to carry the Kenyans with you to the point that they fully understand and fully appreciate, this process and why it is important to them? I mean, Kenyans are only made aware of this when the president made the announcement just a month ago, and perhaps that's where all the questions are coming in, and that they were not given adequate time to air their issues, ask their questions, get answered, get clarification.
That is dishonest, because we are doing this as provided for by the law, Registration of Persons Act, which was amended last year. The publication of this intention was done in April of 2018 in the newspapers.
But Bwana PS, the average Kenyan probably doesn't read a newspaper
you just
all the
want,
time.
So I want to take you through the dishonesty that we are seeing, because Yvonne reads newspapers, and you are telling me you have never seen. So that's dishonest.
My grandmother.
Yeah, I'll come to your grandmother. Yes. So what has happened is because we are doing a pilot, it has been assumed that there is no sensitization that we'll do to Kenyans. We would have been unfair to the system to be developing a backroom system and start sensitizing people about registration before we are ready. Watch this space. From this week, after we finished with the pilot, we will come, do our feedback, correct the systems, then we'll go out there and start explaining what are the benefits, what are we doing.
But you do understand then why there's all of this uproar. I mean, people are bombarded with this information. And one of the reasons is this. They went through a biometric registration during the pre-voting exercise. In fact, senior citizens have been asked to go to various Huduma centers, I believe last week, to go and update their records. In the last year or two, students have been told that they would get a unique PIN identification number that would take them through school. Now they hear that there's this number that will start when they're the age of 6. So at the age of 6, a parent has to get the number for their school registration, to get this number. There's a census that's coming up. I mean, there's an extent to which Kenyans are, fatigued by this whole process of gathering a lot of information and data. You know,
Yvonne, we try to divert ourselves from the important question. The important question that I would expect you to drill me into is, what is the use of this number? Then we ask ourselves. I asked you that in the beginning. We ask ourselves, is it important? And I told you, since Kenyan history, Kenya has never had a digital register. If you go to countries, and we have many examples, we have Rwanda just across here, have South Africa across here, who use the citizens' data to do planning, who use the citizens' data to do a lot of things. And if you had time, I will tell you this. We work with this registration from a child who is born, and we categorize it into 3. The one who is 0 days to 6 years, the one who is 6 years to 18 years, and the one who is above 18. We know what happens because according to science, you cannot take biometric of a child who is below 6 years because they haven't formed. So we'll expect at age 6, then this child will go to school. Okay. And when they are going to school, then we will ask them for the biometric and give them the number that will take them through the education. But why would these numbers be different in the fullness of time? And this is what we are trying to do, so that
does that mean then the one that they were getting when the cabinet secretary was actually in the Ministry of Education, will they not be getting that unique number that takes them all through school?
I was walking you through a journey of the one who has nothing. Right. That's a child who is born now. But you, Yvonne, you are not born now. So you have an ID, you have an NHIF, so we cannot walk you through that journey. So what we will need to do is to take all your documents, put them in one source.
So you wouldn't need me then, would you?
We will need you because we need a live person We need...
But you took my photo when I was getting my ID and my fingerprints.
We took your photo when you're getting your ID.
Yeah, which is the same thing you're getting now.
Listen, we want to get digital data. And I have told you, if you go to this equipment that we are using, and let's be honest as Kenyans, there has been a lot of cheating around registration of things. This kit that we have, even if you came with a passport from any other place, it will not accept. You must be a live person.
Okay.
Then we will, once we capture your biometric data, that's it for life. You will never, ever, in any government service, be required to provide your photo, your biometrics, or anything, because we have a digital source.
All right. Let me ask this question regarding data security, because in the world today we have seen breaches, even with Facebook, one of the biggest companies there. And one of the questions that we have is that this is happening in a country that does no law that governs data security in the country and data protection. And there's a number of questions. How do you plan to assure security? How do you plan to ensure that there are no security breaches? If there are, how are you going to deal with them? What law is there to deal with that? Who is storing this data? Who is analyzing it? What are the rights of the citizens to this data? The access to information law itself has had some issues so far with this implementation. Kenyans aren't able to get the information that they need. In the event that somebody with some evil intention uses the data incorrectly, what law is there?
Is it possible that you allow me to
I'm trying to put them all together, and then you can answer it.
Yvonne, you have an ID. Where is the data kept? You don't know, because you believe your government takes care of your data. We are having a misconception that there are no laws in this country that protect privacy of people. In this exercise, we are using the Registration of Persons Act. If you go to that law, and I actually challenge you to take the law, there are very stringent measures, including a fine of 10 million Kenya shillings if a third party or an unauthorized person accesses personal data of Kenyans. So it doesn't mean there aren't laws. I told you.
But there is a data law that since 2011 has been a bit of a challenge. Senator Gideon Moi in the House, even one that has been proposed by the Cabinet Secretary for ICT, Musharu, they were supposed to put those two together. That hasn't happened. And you will agree with me that the situation we're dealing with when it comes to data breaches is quite different from a couple of years ago.
You want me to tell you the fact. Peak Registration of Persons Act, the law under which Huduma number is being carried out, and read the law. That law prohibits, and that is why even though we have data from you on your ID, we don't provide it to anybody who is unauthorized, because the law is very clear that should a person provide this data to a third party or unauthorized persons, then there are consequences.
But yet, PS, there was a time just before the election, a number of people found themselves to have been registered to political parties, yet they themselves claimed they hadn't. We know registration to a political party requires a number of details. Now, I'm just trying to show you how certain times data can be used for purposes other than its intention. In that instance,
will you take any time to look at the positive use of data first? Because data that was registering people in political parties, data that has been misused in this country, did it come from the National Registration Bureau? I'll tell you the answer is no. Because there are very many places you are giving your data. Whenever you are entering a building, you sign a book, you leave your ID there.
Is that legal?
Whether it's legal or not, you do it. There are very many areas where in our history we have had a lot of Kenyans give their information without care. And that is why we are saying we want to secure your data. And I'll tell you the big elephant in the house, because I also check what Kenyans are saying in social media and all that. The big elephant in the house is actually not data protection, because the government is clear, because we have kept shifting goalposts around this place. Issue? We started by saying we are picking people's DNA. That was the first, and it was disabused. I have the form here that you can see clearly doesn't have anywhere. It's asking for your DNA. So when that couldn't work, then we moved to religion. We said we are registering people through the biblical 6666. After that can't work, because this is not a unique project in this country. It's all over the world. Now we have moved to protection of data. It's clear that we have sufficient laws in this country that can protect the data. But the big problem is we have just come from a process that had issues of procurement and all this. And whenever procurement is done, and people are not understanding, because those are the questions I'm seeing in social media. So this project, so that I make this very clear, had two components. One is procurement of biometric kits, which are that 1,500, which we procured. And they are in the country, already tested, and in our stores at the government printer. The second component is procurement of technology. We, in the Ministry of Interior, decided we are not going to buy technology when we have a lot of young people who can do it. And we decided at zero cost we are going to develop the technology, because people have not seen where technology was bought. They imagine there is someone somewhere who bought technology. But perhaps to
provide that information to just allay people's fears.
I have been on interviews over 100 times on this question, and I still continue saying it is responsible of our government, first, to provide opportunities to our young people to do such challenging jobs. Number two, to provide our government with the opportunity to secure data of its own people, unlike in the past where this data has always been given to foreigners. This time, I want to assure you, this is a 100% government funded project where we are in charge. Kenyans are in charge of their own data.
Okay, thank you very much. PS Karanja Kibicho in the Ministry of Interior speaking to us about the Huduma number and answering and clarifying some of those questions that have arisen in the wake of the pilot project that continues up until the end of this month, and then possibly we will roll out.
We will roll out on 15th of March and do it for 45 days.
All right, thank you very much,
thank you very much,
for joining us here on the program tonight. We're taking a break. When we come back, we have the day's business news and sports as well.